welcome to Year 3 edition of Teach Time. Today we're going to be looking at volume. So volume is when we measure the amount of liquid, or the total area of space that a liquid takes up. When we measure in volume, we normally measure in millilitres and in litres. But I have thrown an extra one in here just so you can see the difference, well, the similarity even, between some of your other measurements, which is centilitres. Now you might be remembering this from measurement of length, where you've got millimetres, centimetres and metres. Well, in volume we measure it as millilitres, centilitres and litres. But we don't need to worry about centilitres, that was just there to give you a heads up. So, you might have a jug like this in your kitchen that mums or dads or even you have used to measure out liquids to go in a cake, or if you're trying to make something a sauce, you might measure out how much oil or how much tomato goes in. I use measuring jugs a lot, and I always like to see how many millilitres are in each jug. Sometimes you can get some that go up to 2,000 millilitres. But here I've just got one that goes up to 600 millilitres. Now, I can measure as much as up to 600 millilitres of liquid in this jug, but I'm going to get you to figure out how much this one is first. So the way you work out millilitres is you see where the liquid is up to. There's levels at the side. These little lines are levels. So if the liquid is level with one of the lines, then you can clearly read it. Now I've just drawn over that so you can't quite see it as well, but I know that it says there that it's 300 millilitres of liquid. So have a go at this one underneath. Pause the video quickly, see if you can work out how many millilitres are in there. Okay, so if you did what I did up there and you followed the line to the level, I know it's a bit of a wonky line, but we'll just pretend that it's straight, you should have seen that it's directly lined up with the 200 millilitres. So I would say here that I have 200 millilitres of water. Now, what about if I wanted a different amount? What about if I wanted 250 millilitres? Sometimes you don't want the amount in hundreds, sometimes you want it in 50s. That's where these little lines come in handy. Some jugs even have more, they have 3 lines in between each one, but we're just going to worry about these middle ones. Okay, so between each 100 jump there is one line. That's because every time we jump up by 50 as well. So I start here with 50 millilitres, and then I go to 100, then 150, 200, 250, 300, and so on until I get to the top. Now these are really helpful if you only want a certain amount of liquid, so you might have 250 millilitres that you need to weigh out. So you would find 200 and then you go up to the next jump. Normally on a measuring jug these wouldn't have numbers written on, it would just be the hundreds that would have the number written on. So you just have to find the halfway point between these two. So I found it here and I'm going to measure out my water, and I'll double check that it's on the level for 250 millilitres. Now, let's have a go at measuring out some different liquids. So I'm going to read out this question for you. Jack is making a cake. He has to measure all of the liquids into one jug. He needs 100 millilitres of water, 50 millilitres of oil, 100 millilitres of cream, and 150 millilitres of melted butter. Now, I want you to pause the video in a second, and just using column addition, I want to see if you can work out what the total amount of liquid he should have is. Okay, let's go through this. So I've got nothing in my units. I've got nothing in this first column, so I'll put a 0 down here again. In my next column, my tens, I've got 5 and 5. We should all know that 5 and 5 make 10. So I carry the 1 and I write the 0 down here. And then in my hundreds column, I've got 1, 2, 3, and then need to add my 1 at the end to make 400 millilitres. Now we can even double check this on the jug. So I'm going to start with the 100 millilitres of water. So I'm going to start, I'll colour that bit in blue so you can clearly see that's the 100 millilitres of water. Next we need 50 millilitres of oil. Now I don't have 50 written on here, but I know that the next jump between these hundreds is 50 millilitres. So I only need one of them. If you're trying to measure different amounts and it's asking you to keep adding on, whenever you add, you've just got to make sure that you pretend that this is 0 again. So I'm not doing 150 millilitres of oil. All I've done is I've pretended my 100 here that I'm back to 0. And so I've just jumped up for 50 to make my 50 millilitres of oil. So next thing is I need my 100 millilitres of cream. Now I'm on a 50 mark here, so I need to be careful not to jump up to 100. Now I know that there are two 50s in 100. 50 add 50 is 100. So I know that I just need two 50 jumps to make up 100 millilitres of cream. So I jump once, twice, and I get to here. Okay, and then there's just one more to go. 150 millilitres of melted butter. Now I'm going to just jump my first 50, so I'm just going to take away this 50 from it, so I'll jump up here. So that's my 50 gone. Now all I need to do is add 100, so I'm on 100 again, so I can just go straight up to this line here. And when we colour it in, we can see that all of our liquid is level to 400. So we know that it's right. When we're working in litres, litres are a lot bigger than millilitres. Litres are greater than millilitres. There are 1,000 millilitres in 1 litre. For example, if you've got a bottle of fizzy at home, you might find that it's 2 litres. Now they wouldn't measure these huge bottles in millilitres, would they? Because then it would be writing on the bottle, well that's 2,000 millilitres. That seems like a lot more, doesn't it? But actually, it's just the same. Because when we work in litres, we're dividing our millilitres by 1,000. So we're moving it back 3 places on our place value table. So I would have here my thousands, hundreds, tens, units, and my decimal point would go here. And then after that I would have my tenths, I would have my hundredths, and then my thousandths. Okay, so I start with 2,000 millilitres here. To turn it into 2 litres, I've got to jump back 3 spaces. So you can see I've jumped 1, 2, 3. So now my 0 will start in this column. This one's going to jump back as well. 1, 2, 3. Notice how I'm not counting the decimal point as one of my jumps. That's because this is kind of just a placeholder. You don't count this, you jump over it instead. So my next 0 goes in this column. Then I'm going to jump this one back 1, 2, 3 into this column. And then my 2, 1, 2, 3. So my 2 goes into my units. Now if all I have after the decimal points is zeros, I can just write it as the number 2. If I had 2,500 millilitres, then I would have to jump my 5 back 1, 2, 3. So instead of being a 0, this would be a 5. And so I would have to write 2.5 and then forget the zeros. So I want you to have a go, just working with the litres at the moment. See if you can figure out how many millilitres should be in these litres. Use this one up here to help you. If you've got just 2 litres, all I've had to do here is add 3 zeros. I've times it by 1,000. I've moved it forward. So all we're doing now will be moving it 1, 2, 3 back to where it began. So see if you can have a go. Pause the video now and work out what 3 litres should be in millilitres and what 6 litres should be in millilitres. Okay, that's long enough. So 3 litres, if we work on this principle of just adding 3 zeros to the end, should be 3,000 millilitres. Now all I've done is I've times this number, I've times 3 by 1,000, which means I've moved it forward 3 places. And I'll do the same thing with the 6. I will times it by 1,000 to make 6,000 millilitres. Now I already mentioned it. Up here. What if you had 2,500? Well, 500 millilitres is half of a litre, or 0.5 of a litre. So if I had 1.5 litres, then I would have 1,500 millilitres. And if I wrote this on a place value table, it would be 1500 with my decimal point there, and then my next few columns. So, see if you can figure out what they should be as millilitres. So we can start here. Let's just do this one together. So we've got to make sure that 1,500 is 1.5 litres when we jump it back. So remember, we're dividing it by 1,000. So we go 1, 2, 3. We jump it back 3 spaces. So the 0 goes there. Then the next one, 1, 2, 3. The 0 goes here. Then the next one, 1, 2, 3. So this time my 5 goes here. Then I need to put my decimal point in, and then my 1 jumps back 1, 2, 3 to make 1.5. I forget my zeros, so 1.5 litres. When I turn this into millilitres, so if I have here just the 3.5, if there is a 0.5 afterwards, I've just got to add 2 zeros. Have a look up here. I've taken away my 2 zeros to turn it into 3.5, so I've just got to add them on again. So pause the video now and have a go and see if you can turn these into millilitres. Okay, let's have a look at this together. So, I know that my 3, if I'd written it up there, would go first. Then I would have my 5, and then I need to add my 2 zeros. Next thing goes for my 2.5, turns into 2,500. And the same for my 5.5. It turns into 5,500. If I've only got one number after my decimal point, then I've got to add 2 zeros. But what if I have 2 numbers after my decimal point? Well, then I just have to add 1 zero to turn it into millilitres again. So here I've got 3.25. Now have a look here, I've got 2 numbers after my decimal point. If I jump these forward, then it would look a bit like this, with a gap there. Because I've jumped them forward, I've taken that one 1, 2, 3. I've taken this one 1, 2, 3, and this one 1, 2, 3. To turn it into 325 blank decimal point. But I can't just have a blank here. I have to add my 0. Think of the 0 as a placeholder. So now, instead of 325 blank, I've got 3,250. So I know that it's 3,250 millilitres. So I've got 2 numbers after my decimal point again, so I've just got to add 1 0 again. So that will be 6,250. And lastly, it doesn't matter if I've got 2 numbers in front of my decimal point, I've still only got 2 after it, so it will be 10,250. Okay? Now, there will be a worksheet on this on Facebook. This is a more complicated term in math. Now, this can be a pretty complicated thing to do in maths. I certainly struggle with volume a lot. So, one way you can practice this is to get out the measuring jug at home with your parents' permission and see if you can measure out different liquids. Or see if you've got any bottles lying around the house. See if they tell you how many millilitres or litres are in them. Then you can see if you can add them up or turn them into millilitres if they're litres, or if they're in millilitres, try turning them into litres. There is a worksheet on Facebook as well for you to have a go at, and remember, don't spend too long on this one. I'd say the more practical you can get, the more measuring out you can do, the better. And have lots of fun, guys.